Okay, welcome Edge people, welcome all. Nice to have you here in this morning of network states, network societies, and the impact of Web3 in governance. Our idea today is to debate a little bit with some of the people that's thinking about these concepts, about what's actually the definition, if we can get a kind of definition of what this means, and what's the future of it. Okay? These are some of the organizations that are going to be today represented. And the idea of the agenda is we will give a little conceptual context. I will share with you one perspective I have about politics and what I'm starting to talk about, like regenerative politics. And we will have two digital presentations by Anastasia, Kalinina, and Michel Bauwens. And then we will have an open dialogue and panel discussion where I will give the word to some of our invited panelists. And then the idea will be to have a little conversation, even with the questions that can come up from you guys there in the audience. So that's the idea of this hour and a half that will be together. So I was thinking about what's regenerative politics. And I think it's very important to start thinking on a new conception of politics. Since when we think of politics, I've been thinking, talking with people, and most of the people tends to associate politics to the international stage, the states, and what the so-called leaders of the world are doing. And I think we have been detached to the root concept of politics that comes from the ancient Greeks in its etymology. And that's basically how the citizens of a political area, a polis in their times, the political cities, organize, coordinate, and arrive to decisions that tend to be for the common good of the population living in that place. So we've been detached from that original concept. And I've been thinking for a few decades, and I want to share with you a synthesis of two elements that I think can give us an idea of how we can start rethinking politics. And these are two concepts, basically, spirituality and politics itself. And I try to define now spirituality as the art of living, which is something that starts from the individual. So this is very important. It starts from me. I, as a spiritual being, start to see how do I live in this crazy world that we share, and in this beautiful planet that we share, because I do this thing, and I think this is very important to start making a distinction among the planet, Earth, and the world, which is a political construction that humanity does living on Earth. But there are two different concepts that we also tend to mix, and I think this is important to start unmixing, separating, in order to start building a new thing, no? Because I think we are in the brink of that. We are in a moment where we need to build another thing. And the other concept, the politics, is the art of coexisting or co-living. So spirituality, the art of living; politics, the art of co-living with the other. So then if we get both of those concepts together, we have spiritual politics, or what I would like to call regenerative politics, a new way of understanding this that goes away from the old pattern, the old way of understanding politics as scarcity, competition, control, centralization. No? Control is centralization. This one already opens, this new conception opens in our possibilities, the possibility, again, of thinking in another ways. Instead of scarcity, we can think on abundance. We can create abundance. instead of control and manipulation, we can think on collaboration instead of competition, collaboration, okay? This is, I know it's very in the realm of concepts, but something that we need to start thinking if we want to go to what I like to call more like a network civilization, okay? This is one of the concepts I want to bring today. Okay, now I will introduce Michel Bauwens. I think most of you do know him, but I have a little bio about him for those who doesn't. Michel is the founder and director of the P2P Foundation. In the P2P Foundation, Satoshi Nakamoto sent his first message and published the white paper of Bitcoin. And it's a global group of researchers exploring peer production and common-centric economics. And right now, I invited him to speak in a few minutes about Cosmo-Localism and the commons transition. So we will listen to him directly.
Yes, so here Michel Bauwens of the P2P Foundation with my friend Pablo behind the camera from China. And so first of all, thank you and others for inviting me to participate remotely from Chongqing here in China. So I want to say a few words that maybe it's not what you expect, because I have a slightly different vision of the network state topic. So the way I see the world today is there are kind of three alternatives. And the reason I think this way is because I think you can look at history as a kind of a continuous rivalry between coordination engines and coordination elites. So think of World War I as a struggle between nation states and empires. And as you noticed, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman, Habsburg, all these empires disappeared and the nation state remained as like the model. But then within the nation state, there were three models to manage the nation state: fascism, communism, and parliamentary democracy, and that was World War II. So again, you have this struggle between these three different models. And so what will be the struggle today? It's often referred to a bit simplistically as the West versus the rest. And I'd like to refer to Michael Hudson's work, who basically sees kind of a split occurring about 3,000 years ago between an Eastern model, which he says is harmony-based, with a very strong central state that manages the relationships between different social groups for the benefit of the whole, if you like. And so this is not a moral judgment, this is just kind of trying to think how it works. And then the West, where the Greek, basically aristocracy took power, so there was a private caste that took power, created a debt-based system, and that created a revolution, which was the Greek polis. And so basically the Western democracy is this mixture of oligarchy, unequal distribution of goods, and democracy, equal political status, and with all the tensions, so it's a conflict-based system. So what about today? So today we have the West, which is kind of in a culture war, almost like a civil war between two factions. And I would say, the Davos model was dominant for a long time, which is basically the idea of creating a global network, like multi-stakeholder partnerships. And there's like 400 different domains, and each domain would have like an alliance between states, capital, and approved NGOs, but without the people. So that would be the critique you could make on that model. And then against that, there's now a kind of revolt, a populist revolt, which wants to revive the nation state. And if you look at the rest, the dominant powers in the rest, China, Russia, India, have a common point, which is they also move from nation state by something that some people call civilization states, which is kind of, I see it as a regression in service of the ego, they're afraid of the cultural dissolution which they see in the West, and they want to kind of like reintegrate parts of the past to increase their stability. So that's what I see as the situation, the objective situation, like the major forces at play. But I think there's a third force, and that's of course what I would like to represent, and that's I call it the archipelago of regenerative projects. And this is kind of partially the localist revolt. So lots of people, are creating rural commons, urban commons projects, regenerative, circular, and really people are engaged in this kind of attempt to recreate new life, which is more ecologically responsible. And that's definitely happening, but it's happening, they're undercapitalized, etc., etc. And then on the other side, we have, I think, what you represent in this room, which is kind of the Web3 movement, which is kind of post-national, transnational coordination, but it's like a step removed from this material reality of production. And so what I represent as cosmo-local option is both combination of those two as a third model. So you combine let's say, more responsible production that is in balance with the natural resources and the ecology of the planet. And so everything that's heavy is local, but you combine that with the coordination capacity that has been developed by the open source, the crypto and the Web3 movements, which is at this stage coordinating capital and code. But what about using those technologies to coordinate production? So that's kind of the dream, and that's what the archipelago of regenerative projects is. The kind of idea of a transnational possibility, where if you have a local project, you want to do differently, you want to have a short pine calls type 1 civilization that lives in balance, which with its natural capacities. So that model can strengthen itself by choosing to rely local authorities because they are there and they exist, but you can also connect with the vertical dimension, the transnational dimension directly. So that's the dream, and of course that's not exactly what the network state movement represents, but I think it's part of it. So I think within the network state, network nations, regenerative alliance of regenerative communities, there are potential convergences between these different models. So that I'll stop here, and I hope that stimulates your thinking about what a network state can be.
Thank you, Michel. Okay, I do love Michel Bauwens for several reasons, but first time I read about him, he has this macro-historic perspective. When he's speaking, he's taking into account 8,000 years of human history, and that's not very common to see. So make double click on his thinking because it's very important to what's happening. And now I want to introduce you to Anastasia. She also sent us a video. Anastasia is a leader in governance, innovation, and diplomacy, formerly with the World Economic Forum and the UN, controversial institutions if they are, and is the co-founder of the Supersymmetry Institute and reState. And I asked her to talk us a little bit about the concept of regenerative governance. So we're going to listen to her now. Oh, no.
Dear friends, hello. The very wonderful Franz has asked me to report a couple of words on regenerative governance, which I'll happily do in a moment. My name is Anastasia Kalinina. I am a co-founder and CEO of the reState Foundation. We are a Swiss-based foundation, non-profit, looking at the future of governance and the viable alternatives to current systems, be it social, economic, educational, governance, financial. So really wish I could be there with you, very aligned with the things that I understand you will be discussing, but right now let me at least share a few considerations on how we look at regenerative governance at reState Foundation. So obviously, as humanity experiments with new political architectures, from the network states that you're discussing to other distributed communities, we're being invited to ask what we consider to be a deeper question. What kind of life our governance makes possible, right? Not just how we govern, what kind of life our governance makes possible. And for decades, our systems have been designed for control, for efficiency, for scale, which is okay because it serves the purpose, but life itself does not operate from a place of control. I think you noticed throughout your lifetimes. It really operates through relationship, through adaptation, through renewal. And this is the very idea of regenerative governance and how it emerges. It's a shift from managing systems to participating in their ongoing evolution. And so it would be wrong to call regenerative governance yet another governance model. I would say that it's a way of perceiving and designing governance as a living systems, aiming not so much for stability, but for vitality, and asking a question whether our decisions are increasing the conditions for life, both human and non-human, to thrive or not. And so, as we ask this question, the regenerative governance is built on a few core principles. Number one, living systems orientation. So governance is a process of sensing and harmonizing with dynamics of life, not imposing control of them. Second is the logic of the commons, shared resources from data to ecosystems managed as living commons through collective stewardship and transparency. Number three, participation and inclusion, decision-making distributed to where the knowledge and context really resides, and enabling collective intelligence to emerge at every level. Fourth, restorative practice. So we're talking here about the systems that are designed to learn from friction, repair harm, restore coherence rather than further deviation. And finally, contextual value, moving beyond standard metrics towards regenerative value within. And the impact here is measured through vitality, coherence, contribution to the whole. So at reState Foundation, we work precisely at this intersection between governance innovation, regeneration, and systems design. And our mission is to develop frameworks, prototypes, methodologies that help societies evolve towards regenerative governance across institutions, cities, digital networks. So from developing commons-based policy frameworks to advancing the story of place methodology for public systems, we're helping leaders, we're helping technologists, policymakers transition from extraction to regeneration, from coordination to real coherence. And because governance, when truly regenerative, is not just a structure that we design once, it's a continuous process of co-evolution with life itself. So as you enter into the discussion on network states, on AI-mediated coordination, on planetary interdependence, this shift, I would argue, is very existential, right? Because our governance, if it's not regenerative, it simply cannot last. So thank you so much for journeying with us in this explanation of how life itself might govern through us and with us. And I wish you a very wonderful day and a continuation to your discussions. Cheers.
Okay, thank you to Anastasia that sent us her video. Right now, I'm gonna welcome everyone that came a little bit late. Give the welcome to our beautiful panelists that we have here to discuss these concepts. I will start with Chance. Okay, we'll say like one by one, and then we can go sit in there. Telamon will come a little bit later. Chance is a network society. This is a summary of their bios, okay? Then you can talk with them. Chance is a network society researcher with a focus on mobility, policy, nobility. He's gathered insight from over 160 interviews in Susalu-style pop-up cities like these ones that we're having. So welcome, Chance, please. We also have Lovisa Bjorna. Jo?
Perfect.
Okay, Bjorna from Blockchain Gov, a head of platform. As head of platform, Lovisa focused on network nations as non-exit model and on governance education for policymakers. Please welcome Lovisa. And finally, Monty, aka the Prince Merlin, a co-founder of ReFi DAO. Monty is leading voice in regenerative finance, decentralized coordination, and bioregional funding. Welcome, my friend. And later we will have Telamon. Telamon, where I think we all know Telamon. He's one of the core team from Edge City. After a meeting, he will be joining us. Maybe you can all move like a little bit and leave that one for Telamon. Or you chance. Like when Telamon comes, he can sit there. Okay, basically, my name, myself is Franz Túñez. I'm co-founder of NetX State. And with Changuito and Ana, we are co-hosting here the Regen Hub in this beautiful pop-up city that we are all part citizens today. So, I will propose the following format. Like we have these questions, I think you maybe have dedicated a few moments to think about it in the last 10 years of your lives. So maybe you can share in 10 minutes, each one of you, what's your take on this, following these questions if you want, or just like we have a main big concept, which is network state. Okay, I know this one is the controversial one. I have the book here. I call it the blue book because I I printed myself, okay, of Balaji. I think we all might know about the network state itself. I spoke with this a few times in one by one. I do think there's a lot of critics that we can make to this book, particularly on his startup capitalist perspective of the thing, of the concept. But I do think he opened a vortex where basically allowed us to start discussing these concepts, and that's what I think is very important about what he did, as in his moment, Satoshi Nakamoto with Bitcoin opened us the vortex to start discussing about a decentralized monetary system. Before Satoshi and the white paper, we couldn't speak about that. We were on a centralized monetary system ruled by 1% of the transnational elite of the world through their banks and through their states. And right now we can think in other ways, no? That opened like a new framework for us to imagine new possibilities. And I think Balaji did the same, but in the political realm with this concept. And right now we have also network nations, and the concept that we're trying to embrace from NetX State is the civilization, a network civilization, okay? So that as a little context, I will give the word to Chance. You have there a mic, and the next 10 minutes are for you to shine, my friend.
Okay, so the question is, what are people and organizations in Web3, or how are they reshaping society? To start, I'd say I'm not sure. I think it kind of depends on how you define Web3. I think where I've really looked into is maybe a little broader than Web3. I would view Web3 as a crypto subculture, one of multiple of them. I think Bitcoin would be another one. Solana, I don't think would refer that as Web3. My understanding, someone would correct me if I'm wrong, is Web3 is broadly an Ethereum term, kind of part of the Ethereum subculture, which Edge City is rooted in, and a lot of these pop-up villages are rooted in, but not just Ethereum. Solana has their versions of this. I'm not sure if Bitcoin has their versions of this, but other adjacent online communities have their versions. So I'll kind of step a little bit broader than Web3 specifically, because that's more of what I know. And I think I have more conservative view on this, I think, than people maybe in the space generally or in tech generally. It could be kind of my rural roots, but I'm a little uncomfortable with sort of saying we're reshaping society, or we have reshaped society. I think the intention is to reshape society, which is important. It is very much, I think that is something special about Web3. I'm not say it's novel, but it's the fact that there is an intention, it's very earnest and open to reshape society on a global scale. I think that's a big distinction. Whereas tech culture generally, if you think about sort of normie tech culture, it's very potent, it's very similar. You could view as Web3 as maybe somewhat of a, not diluted is the right word, but it's adjacent to more general tech culture, but it's very much rooted in certain spaces. Like it's very much a San Francisco central hub thing, whereas Web3 to me, one of the things I really enjoy about it and attracts me to it is very global in nature. It's not just we're going to do this for this one jurisdiction or this one country. It's very much how can we do this for people around the world? How can we shift things for people around the world? So I like that. I think also another thing that's very earnest about it is that it is a very earnest project to think about, okay, what century are we in now? What are the institutions that we have now? What could they be in this century where we have new conditions and new underlying realities that we have? Many people in this room have probably grown up on the internet, so to speak. That's different than our parents' generation or their grandparents' generation. So I view this as very much an exciting aspect of Web3, that there is this earnestness about shifting things, thinking about how are things now and how can we improve that for now for a broad swath population. I think that is very positive. And then you can go into a little more specific things like with startup or network societies. What I've studied is a lot of these pop-up villages. So to give more context, I originally kind of been hanging around sort of experimental stuff around NetX State before it was called 1729, and DAOs a little bit as well. And it was very, we'll say, theoretical. I had a project that I did for the NetX State team where I had made this big list of projects in the space maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was very theoretical. It was very kind of big idea, technical solutions with no users kind of things. And Zuzulu, I think, was very intentionally a project of let's do something serious that's concrete and small, that's along the lines of the NetX State. I think that was Vitalik's one of his reasoning for doing it, and that exploded this huge collection of these pop-up villages that we're a part of now. There's something like, depends how you count them, 60 to 100 in the last 2-3 years of these, of varying sizes that range from 500 plus to 130, and they all kind of have this same format, or I kind of think of it as a pop-up model. And I think that is a pretty, it's not novel in the way of like people gathering, but it's novel in that you have people from all these different industries coming with very serious intentions of like, how can we think through these topics? And they have access to capital. They can bring talent. This sort of novel social organization, but it's very internet first. I think that's an example of like something more concrete that's really fascinating about that is Web3 enabled. And maybe I'll say one more thing on this that I think is where it's going towards the reshaping society aspect is in, I think these network societies are starting to mature. It's very early now. I think it's very rudimentary at this point, but starting to organize and get a sense of what they are, what their boundaries are, and what they can do as a collective unit. And that includes interacting with jurisdictions. So that could be a small town like this, kind of connecting with the town, reshaping places for a time, helping in ways they can, making connections there in a kind of a bridging social capital manner. Or it could be with much larger spaces, like entire countries. Recently, Bhutan said they're going to be using Ethereum for an identity system. I don't think that's a coincidence that Edge City was there previously before that. I think there are some interesting there's interesting things emerging, or institutions is the right word, but there's different things emerging on how these network societies are interacting with the real world and jurisdictions. And both the jurisdictions and the network societies are kind of figuring that out now. But I think, to use a line from an article that some people here have read, especially people who are in the Citizenship Protocols residency, Alice Maz wrote an article that mentioned these things might seem kind of silly now, but what will they look like 20, 30 years from now? These are the pop-up cities and things, network societies that are emerging. I think that is what I'm really excited about. I think that is where you will see a lot more shaping of society.
Thank you, Chance.
Awesome. Great to be here. Thank you so much, Franz, for hosting this space. This is fun.
Thank you.
And I always love hearing Michel Bauwens. Intellectual, foundational inspiration. One watching Gav as well for a lot of my work and thinking. Yeah, I'm not an academic, but I'm going to do that annoying academic thing where we go like, what do we really mean by society? Like define that term. And I think traditionally it's like referring to a territorial place, and then it's like the culture and the institutions and the relationships and the social contracts that make up that place. So I'm from Britain, and we've got like a British society or culture, whatever that might mean to different people in this room. And then we're thinking about what is a network society. Well, now we don't need to be so territorially constrained because we now have digital technologies, we have mobility, we can suddenly create societies of people that are connected across the globe and start to build shared sets of culture. I think there is a kind of Web3 culture, although I'd say there's many different subcultures, but it's kind of emerging. And we're starting to experiment with new institutional forms, new governance, new resource allocation mechanisms. And so there are the foundations here of building these new types of societies, and I think we're in here in Edge quite an exciting example of that. Even last night, we were sitting around having dinner, and there were about 15 people around, and every single person was from a different country across the globe, and yet we're sharing some common threads, and yet we're participating in this kind of system together. So I'm seeing a lot of exciting stuff emerging there. I think we're a bit too soon to say that we're reshaping society at large, but I think what we are doing is prototyping new types of societies that could grow and evolve into very interesting and exciting things. And I think touching on the kind of network society, network state kind of conversation a bit, I think, yeah, one of the interesting things around network states, I think, is, or one of the less so interesting things, is that they can be quite insular. They can be quite like, let's try and carve out like a territorial enclave where we can all go and inhabit in some place and be separate from the nations that are here, the other institutions, the other, and kind of build completely new. And I think in some senses, we've mentioned this a little bit, can be problematic. You're kind of isolating yourself and almost going back to that combative kind of competitive territorial kind of games. But what I think is really exciting about this movement of network society is it's more about like how can we go to different places and experiment with new forms of society, but within other structures. And obviously what we're trying to do in the Regen House and other movements here is like how do we bring this locally as well and integrate locally. So I think that's a super important conversation. And also looking at like the bioregional movement. Maybe people here are more familiar with pop-up cities and network states than this amazing bioregional movement that's also kind of emerging, of saying, okay, we've currently drawn the world map with nation-state boundaries, often in like colonial histories, whereas we could also look at the world bioregionally, and we could look at what is the geology, the natural features of the land, but also the social, cultural history of a place, and start to define a more flexible boundary based on that kind of rooted in place and understanding of place. And then design institutions and coordinating structures that are really rooted in that place and rooted in that local indigenous knowledge, and actually design political institutions that are governing resources in a much more place-based way. And rather than completely exiting and being totally separate to other institutions and nation states, it's kind of like a new layer that can sit on top and to govern and resources and hopefully provide voice and interaction to shift those other existing systems in a better direction, say, hey, look, we're building something new here, and we can shift more people and resources into those structures. So I'd really like to bring those kind of models more into this conversation rather than the obsession, I think, in the network state of like, let's exit, let's avoid taxes, avoid the regulation, let's create our new like completely separate enclave, which I think doesn't solve a lot of the problems and can sometimes create new problems. So yeah. For me, I'm very much seeing like there's the exciting possibilities of what Web3 culture is emerging and the kind of innovation, experimentation, and the playfulness that a lot of what we see here. But there are definitely like the shadows, right? And I think we need to be aware of those shadows. And there's some quite, in my view, quite scary and dystopian sides of Web3 culture, from the kind of libertarian, techno-fascist, kind of hyper-capitalist model, short-term thinking kind of stuff. So how do we lean away from that and lean into using the tools in bioregional contexts, in local driven contexts, in these kind of new kind of ways. So anyway, that was a whole spiel. But yeah, that's so yeah.
Amazing, thank you, man.
Thank you, and good timing both. Okay, Lovisa, the word is yours.
Thank you, Franz, for having me, and thank you, Franz and Monty, for framing this like this. I think I'm really pleased that I'm right after both of you, because I can probably help with the umbrella of what the points that you have just touched upon. So I totally agree with Monty that I also feel like network states created this incredible meme that we're all very grateful for, because it's a type of network sovereign that we haven't had before, that's highly interesting, and everybody's sniffing around it and very happy that it exists. But it kind of drops the ball on the more interesting points, which is how we can actually create impact at scale. So instead of going into this exit-based model, we can instead leverage the communities that already exist and play with their coordination here. But I will revisit this later. So you gave us this question of what exactly are these new societal structures, which is, and I agree with Charles, it's like we don't know. We really don't know yet. But I think to begin to think about it, we have to understand where we are, like what happened for these new societal structures to start develop originally. And you all spoke about it, including Michel, Bauwens, and Anastasia, and all of the people in this room have this shared experience of that institutional decay is real. We have really massive political problems that our current political forms just cannot grasp. It's like the world has outgrown our political clothes. Like we just don't fit in them anymore, and we're kind of naked, and it's like shit. We need to create some new clothes. And then we have this concept of network sovereignties and network societies, which is kind of a proposal for what this could look like, and everybody's experimenting with the designs. And I think the most interesting thing for me is the concept of the sovereignty, and I would like to double click on it because it's my favorite bit. And as Monty said, we have this traditional concept of sovereignty, which is territorially bound, and you have like the nation state, and they have territorial sovereignty, and then they have monopoly of power, and that's how we see sovereignty. But before we had this concept of national sovereignty, territorially bound, we had like actual sovereigns. We had the sovereign as the divine right of kings, and then we had some sort, like there was a lot of things that happened to make that dissolve, but one of the things that happened was that the printing press came along and just totally democratized information and spread opinions so that people could organize in new ways. And there was another experience of where the world kind of outgrew the political systems, because the people of the time, they were like, actually, this is not representative of the issues that we have at hand, and we want to have coordinated mechanisms that are better. And then we had nation states, which was really cool at the time because they were kind of imagined communities to a certain degree. They had some military attacks as well, but they were imagined communities and people could come together because they shared a culture. Sovereignty rabbit hole over. But now we have this shift again where we have new technology, we have the whole set of digital technologies that make it possible for us to coordinate at scale in a totally novel way. And we've had internet for a long time, and it's done a lot of beautiful and not so beautiful things to us. And now we've had also blockchain technologies and Web3 technologies for a fair amount of time, and it's also done a lot of beautiful and not so beautiful things to us. But we have the ingredients to create a really cool coordination system that is global with the help of the Web3 technologies. It's not like a Web3 society, but it's built with help of the Web3 technologies. And then we can embed the societies that we already have. Like the bioregion movement is a great example because it's local hubs that share a common goal, and they need a coordination mechanism internally, and they also need a coordination mechanism across each other. So they need like a way to hang out more efficiently inside of themselves, and they need a better way to hang out globally, and they also need a way to kind of vertically scale into political structures. So if we can manage to play with this in a more interesting way than to just exit, we have a really interesting design problem that is open. Because if we exit and just create like a new territorially based nation, which is a network state but just connected, it's like, it's cool, but it could be a lot cooler. And I'm happy to be in this room and to discuss this further with all of you. Like, how can we make this as good as possible?
Thank you, Lovisa. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, you made a very great time, and I think Telamon is not here. So we will move forward on the panel among us, unless I'm looking at you, Ryan, because I think you are the core team of Edge. If you would like to give your perspective as core team of Edge, if you are. Oh, look who's coming! Hello, Tela. Okay, I was about to ask Ryan if he wanted to give the Edge City perspective on network, nations, states. Yeah, please. We all know Telamon. Give a applause to our last panelist that makes a little time for us here. Okay, listen. I don't know if you got this question, but the main idea is we are discussing here what's the future of network states, nations, or this civilization. And you can share your thoughts. I think it will be very interesting for us to hear, since you've been in the organization of various pop-up cities like this, beautiful, which I think they do represent like I will share this image, like if what's happening in Web3 in the broader sense, as Chance mentioned, would be like the mycelium, okay, of the fungi realm. I think these pop-up cities are the mushrooms actually going in different parts of the world that are showing that there's a network being grown behind, you know. So if you want to share with us in 5 minutes your thoughts about it, beautiful.
Sure thing. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the way I look at it is, you know, we're at the forefront of maybe the most like basic macro trend of that we're all going more digital. And you know, Web3 is a tool for that. We need ownership, we need privacy resistant security, and we have a lot of tools that Web3 brings. The way that I think that looks on a more like social level, and like, you know, even if, you know, so we are spending more time in the digital realm. Even when we are in the physical realm, you know, we are amplifying or, you know, using tools that are apps or digitally based. And I think that's going to continue growing with VR, AR, and, you know, all types of digital tools we create. But the most interesting social impact, I think that the network society movement kind of is essentially having the tailwinds from, I think the analogy is similar to how maybe societies initially used to have, it's essentially your communal identity. Your communal identity used to be, you know, talking maybe 200 years ago, your heritage, I mean, the language you spoke, your religion, maybe the village you're from, the color of your skin. Like, you have these like communal identity factors that's what you would associate you with. That's kind of transitioned in the last 100 years to, you know, a affiliation to a nation state, you know, where you would feel more Argentine than you would feel whatever your actual, you know, genetic heritage was. And, you know, that's become secondary. You know, you'll introduce yourself as, you know, I'm South African, but my parents are definitely a European mix, or I'm not introducing with my religion or my small like tribe, wherever I came from. And I think we're seeing now that a second shift, which is, you know, we are spending increasingly more time on the internet first, and we're finding our communal identity in the internet before we even like that it supersedes our nation state affiliation. Is kind of the way I'm looking at it. And especially I think with the next generation who's, you know, growing up on the internet. I think a lot of us, the internet came, or at least the version we have today, and the amount of time we're spending a lot later. But you know, the kids that are growing up today, they meet their friends on gaming forums, on the internet, on the sub niches of the internet they find themselves. And they make a lot more friends online there first and find the communities there first, more than they would know they even, you know, their neighbor in real life. So I think the pop-up city movement, the natural state movement, is the physical or the IRL representation of that trend. You know, when you find your online communities first, that's going to start superseding, and whatever that looks like is I think the question, and these pop-up villages are the perfect experimental place for this. But if that's you know, I think we're going to use analogies that we have models that we have created in our heads, like membership models, you know, citizenships like passports, but I think it might be something else that we can't really quite wrap our head around yet. That's something in between that. Where we'll have affiliation to a online community that is global, that supersedes nation states as well as, you know, your heritage, or you know, and that becomes your driving identity. And then, you know, we'll hopefully find tools, you know, with a lot of many people working on that, that's how we can kind of abstract away password privilege or any of the other, you know, details that we've kind of set up the current globe. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Sorry, I was very concentrated. Thank you, Telamo. Thank you for coming again. Okay, and right now I think like I have a few reactions of each one of your comments, but I would like to invite everyone to, if you do have questions, in the next, we have 40 minutes, we can discuss. I brought obviously the main definition that we have of network states, which brings itself a lot of reactions, but I think it kind of synthesizes what we all been speaking, no? A highly aligned online community that's being built with capacity for collective action, which I think we have to see this yet. Eventually, we can see if we can crowdfund territories around the world, and eventually, this will be the last part, gains diplomatic recognition from the pre-existing states. Again, besides the whole criticism that we can make of Balázs's work, I think he did a very good summary here of a process that, as Lovisa was saying, all of us are saying basically, it comes like the evolution of states as we know it. And I will give my thought about this, like the modern national state is part of a historical, cultural, political process that was born specifically in Europe, okay? And from Europe, through the imperialist movement, it was expanded to the rest of the planet, okay? As we know it, and it kind of like the modern national state gained this identity. I'm trying to translate from my Spanish to English, but being like as it's something universal, as if it has always been there, you know, and it's like kind of, okay, Hobbes put it in a one word, Leviathan, no, it's there, and it controls and puts in order our lives, and we need the state and this whole thing, okay? But then when you go to history, you see that there are a lot of ways of organizing and coordinating. These were all the time across our history. And I think that due to the global risks that we are facing as humanity, and when one is aware of those, and not in an ideological level, this is not a matter of I believe or I don't believe that the planet is changing, like earth sciences are very objective, no? They are measuring and they are saying, hey, Earth is changing, and the thing seems to be more dramatic than what we normally think, because we are in the wheel of these modern states and his sister or brother capitalism working together, you know, and we are in the hamster wheel and we don't have time to actually think what's happening. Okay, so again, coming back to this, besides the concept of Balázs, I think we are in the process of, I think I spoke with Chance in an interview 1 year ago, and this idea came to me when in the Western, in Europe, basically, you have these absolute monarchies were 16th, 17th century, okay? And crazy people, like even Thomas Hobbes and John Locke from the British side, or Rousseau, Montesquieu from the French side, started saying, hey guys, why don't we start thinking that maybe one person having the whole control of the whole society doesn't make sense, and we can divide the power in, I don't know, the judicial, the legislative, the executive, and have this, what then became the republics, okay? I'm synthesizing a lot the processes, but basically they started thinking that, and then that took form on reality. And those modern states work for a few centuries, but they are not working anymore, no? We are seeing that they are obsolete. Like I started being aware of this, like when you check basically the global risks and where the Earth is going, you know, and you see that the information is there from the 70s, basically. With 50 years, we already knew that Earth was going through a very dramatic change, and none of these old institutions was able to pace with that, to do something about it, okay? is when we start to, okay, do we take this on our account? Do we become responsible of our destiny? And that, I think that's the main question. And this is the process that we are living today. Or we wait until a state or a corporation or someone or a messiah comes and saves us, you know? And here is where I will give you back the words to spark your reaction on this idea that I would ask, like for instance, what I'm living here in Edge, I lived in March in Edge City in Brazil, a shorter version, were like 50 persons, but what I started to see is that all of us in either of the area or way that brought us here are kind of aware of all of this. And my question was yesterday while I was thinking this moment of the panel is how do we, like, I do already feel with our differences, and I don't know all of us yet, but with each one I meet, I see a spark of, oh, we are in the same way. We are meeting for something, you know? And I'm starting to think, or when or how do we recognize we are a highly aligned, not only online, real community growing around the world that we can organize ourselves? Because why do we need 1,000 platforms, or we can build altogether one that works for all, no? With capacity for collective action, you know, to crowdfund territories, because as we see, we have different resources. For instance, here's this beautiful territory, resources, and a good democracy, and a good demographics, and a good culture, okay? But here there's a lack of capital and technology, okay? But maybe someone is coming from a place where there's a lot of capital, and someone is coming from a place where there's a lot of technology. So how or when are we going to integrate all of this? Start creating places that are already in the new paradigm and be connected around the world. Because as we are trying, I was born here in Argentina, so I'm thinking from this territory because I'm from Latam. But yesterday we were talking with other of the regions from North America that they are in the same way, or Southeast Asia, and they're in the same path. No? So I think we already have all of these parts, and we have to see how we make it happen. This one, the diplomatic recognition, will be another topic itself, no? Like how do we interact with the old states and show them that this is needed, no? So I will give you the word, guys, and you can like give your reactions, your thoughts on, I'll keep this one, you have that one, on this matter.
Can I start with just a quick comment for the diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states? So it's incredibly interesting to be in these highly aligned communities and to be able to hip-hop back and forth between them all over the world. And they're not necessarily digital anymore, as we see, like the pop-up cities are, as Telemon said, kind of this physical form of that concept. But the end goal, like for the end goal to be the diplomatic recognition, in my mind it comes back to what I was speaking about before, is that then we are still on the same political playing field as we have been for a long time already, and that political playing field is not the most efficient one for solving the issues at hand. So a more interesting approach is to kind of recreate the political playing field, which we now actually have some ingredients to do so. So we have coordination mechanisms that like we have Web3 technology that can really grant us at least, like almost, it can grant us functional sovereignty, like we cannot be shut down. So we have higher end communities, and if we manage to coordinate on this level, then we don't need to gain diplomatic recognition, because we will still have so much collective power and impact from this technology and from our communities that we create a whole new system, kind of. It's very ambitious, but you need to be very ambitious because it's a big bite that we're trying to take. Yeah.
Amazing approach. Let's just do it. Don't ask. Yes. Who goes?
Yeah, I agree. As in, I think people get really caught up on that part of it, and potentially could unnecessarily sort of programming idea because of that. And I think you can think of it in one way, so there are a few ways. You have diplomatic recognition in the way that you work with nation states, like interact with them as a nation state almost, like as an equal. And I think that's just not really necessary at this point to think about. It's not helpful to think about. And it's also not what biology is doing now. I think diplomatic recognition is happening for network states or network societies already. Like if you, for example, Solana and Kazakhstan had an MOU interacting with each other. And they were being there, I was at the conference, we're there, and someone from the Solana side, or actually not even Solana side, it was representing Solana side, of an org that's an equivalent of Edge City in Solana. Forma is the name. And introduced it as the Solana network state and the Kazakhstan nation state, a trade mission, a cultural and trade mission. Which I think maybe here people are like, Solana, don't mention Solana, but that is a network society in this term, I would think of. And they are doing that stuff already. That is diplomatic recognition. Solana is interacting with the nation state of Kazakhstan, and more specifically the jurisdiction Astana and their special economic zone, and trying to help them solve problems they have for that jurisdiction. And if you can do that, whether you're a nation state or a company or a network society, or whatever you want to call these larger crypto ecosystems, that is a form of diplomatic recognition. They are forming partnerships already. So I don't think you need to be you're an equal, like you have to tell me you're an equal to me. I think this is not realistic in the near term, and almost, it's not that it's not worth thinking about, but like squabbling over that, I think is not super productive. And this stuff is happening for that.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for me, it's like, we can all agree the first part of that is great. Like, who doesn't want the highly aligned the society, the culture kind of that's emerging? But I think that for me, the most interesting part is like the institutions, the new institutions that are being designed. And for me, the vibe or the sense I get from Balaji is his kind of institutions he envisions are more like tech bro, plutocracy, driven by wealth and libertarian ideals than the type of institutions and new societies and things that I would like to see birthed. And so, yeah, I think I'm super interested in what are those other forms of new institutions look like that might govern these new type of network sovereignties, states, nations, societies. And for me, that's more, there's amazing examples in the bioregional movement, but also if we fast forward, like what does Edge look like in 20 years? Imagine if there's 100,000 people that are part of this Edge community, the amount of intellectual capital that exists in that network, and financial capital, and all the other kind of, that brings an immense amount of power. How are we then wielding that power in the world? What kind of institutions are governing that, and how are we interacting with the communities that we're going? We could have 100,000 people around the world. We could come to San Martin and be like, okay, we're going to extract from this, you do that. Like, we could act in a very extractive way because we built that power. And if we have an institution that's led by a tech bro oligarchy, then that's probably how it would end up. Whereas if we started to build the foundations of an institution that were more, experimental democracy 3.0, these kind of using these technologies for experimental and interesting decentralized governance mechanisms, and how would that then integrate with the local and support what's going on at the local? And so part of my work is we've launched the Localism Fund, and we are partnering with actual governments and municipalities across the globe to say, hey, how can we bring some of the capital and the technology we've got in the Web3 space? How does it integrate and enhance what you're doing locally? Like, how do we do what governments are doing, but better, the next version of it? And a lot of what governments do is funding public goods, coordinating resources, and we have amazing technology in Web3 to do that in a new way, and we can bring that technology and integrate, but still retaining kind of this new model and new thinking and new systems approach. So that's what I'm really interested in exploring, and I think, awesome to see that others at Edge in this community are also.
Thank you, Monty.
Yeah, we should move to audit. We should get.
I'll keep it short. I'll keep it short. Agree with everything. Just one thing I'd add maybe from the Edge perspective, and this is not a priority for us as much. We think you end up defaulting more to legacy systems if you're chasing this, versus we are a lot more inspired, I think, by something like the plurality movement, someone specifically like Audrey Tang, which very simply is, instead of trying to change a system, just showcase a better alternative, and a kind of the free market aside. And hence we have these month-long experiments where we haven't, really committed to anything major, and we call them micro exits. Like, let's give people the opportunity to kind of micro exit out of the traditional legacy systems, which is like the diplomatic recognition of nation states or similar institutions, and still like we looking from a lot more the long term, that the model doesn't exist yet. We should not be defaulting back kind of to the old, and like use the time, these mini experiments to kind of start seeing what could the future look like versus pushing for something that is inherently legacy inspired.
Thanks, Stella. Okay, thank you to the four. We will proceed now to the audience. I see Benjamin has a question, then Carter. I will go one by one. We have 20 minutes to discuss, so let's enjoy the time. Let's try to be brief so we can take the best of it. Benja?
I think I can resolve this conflict you have with biology and your philosophy and ideas.
Yes,
which
nice.
is that the network society is fundamentally a pluralistic perspective. There's both the societies that we're trying to create and the metastructure, which is the mediation between the various societies, the various highly aligned online communities, the various cultures, the various missions they're on. And so certainly there will be these libertarian societies. There will also be these localist societies, whatever. So I really want to recommend particularly that we seek out a guiding light, and the one I would put forward on that front is the Robert Nozick's idea of meta-utopia, which he describes in Anarchy State Utopia. He talks about a realizable vision of utopia as one in which anyone can create a society, call others to it, establish their own structure, and they can compete amongst one another. And according to his formulation as a political philosopher, the only guarantee that's required is the right of exit, because that's your fundamental protection against tyranny. And then of course you have other stipulations around the interactions between them, like pollution and so on. So I think I put that forward. Let's pursue meta-utopia. Let's do it together as a meta project, while we're also creating these individual societies.
Sorry, what was the name?
Robert
Nozick.
Robert Nozick, and the book is Anarchy, State, and Utopia.
Nice name. You want to react on Benjamin's comments?
I have a short reaction. I think we're very aligned that we should focus on this meta layer of what the commonalities are between all of these network societies, network sovereigns that are emerging, but that the end goal and that the guiding light should be one of exit and competition between these different nodes. I think it's not the wisest movement forward, because this type of competition, it really leads to exclusive cliques instead of really leveraging the collective intelligence that exists in a whole network community. And to focus on that part of how to construct a political society is like you always have the right of exit. I think that's a really good baseline, but it cannot be the main USP in how we create this meta-utopia. There's another alternative, which is the concept of entanglement, which is a really beautiful concept of that the more you give, the more you kind of receive. So like to instead entangle the communities in a way that we are constantly feeding and nurturing each other, and then the entangled communities that have the most commonalities, they form like an eternal entangled network instead of these blob nodes that are competing with each other. I don't have the perfect term for this, but I want to propose this this perspective. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think if you lean too far in the exit direction, you're kind of over-indexing on the Darwinian competition side of human nature and neglecting the cooperation, interdependence, coordination side that has been fundamental to human society and thriving. And so I think we need both, right? Like, yes, there should be opportunities to exit if you're in a system that's messed up. Like, yeah, you should be able to exit, and that's your right. But also, we should be looking at what are the technologies to improve voice. and to improve coordination and kind of cooperation among those communities, and entanglement can be one. Like you have a vested stake in a certain thing, so you actually have a real deep meaning and purpose to improve that thing and make it better, rather than just say, hey, I'm going to pack up and leave all the time, which can lead to just like, how do you fund public goods effectively? How do you kind of bind people together effectively if anyone can just leave with no cost? And also it kind of neglects the fact that not everyone has the choice to exit as much. There are like certain other conditions, your economic circumstances. Like if you're super poor, you can't just leave all the time. Like you don't have the resources to do it. We're very fortunate. We can just bop around the world and go wherever we want and inhabit all these different places. So exit is sometimes an illusion for people in different circumstances, because there may be certain financial, relational, other ties that are preventing that exit from happening. So yeah, would bring that as a complexity.
Thanks. If no more reactions, we can give the word to Carter, and then Ryan, then Fede. Okay.
Is this working?
Yeah, it's working.
Thank you all for sharing on this topic that's super exciting. And part of me kind of wants to surf the wave of, edge cities and public villages around the world for the rest of my life. It's like it feels so fun. But then I also find a part of myself feeling a bit like the more grounded part of me is just wondering how this interacts with the larger kind of like geopolitical dynamics, because it strikes me that this kind of only works if you have countries that are willing to host you and not exert force over you. Physical force, military force, police force. Because if they do that, the nature of these cities is they feel very vulnerable in the physical realm, even though they're very powerful in maybe the digital or economic realm. And so maybe I'm missing something, but that seems like a core dependency, that if you're in a country where you can just be disappeared or saying something that the powers don't like, you're very vulnerable. Or if you're in a country that maybe is dependent on that country economically or geopolitically or militarily. And so I guess I'm curious if, for those who are so immersed in the evolution of these communities, if there's a perspective on do these communities think about how they can be influencing geopolitical balances of where there can be spaces that are going to be safe and resilient for these kinds of new cultures or communities, or are we just sort of hoping things stay pretty stable and that democracy will just win out over the long term, or is there some kind of activism or active engagement with that? Just curious what that brings up for you all.
Probably a good one for the Edge crew, huh? Maybe even that.
Thanks, Carter.
One is good for us, we personally, and hence we have not committed to anything permanent anyway. That's one of the main reasons. The way we look at, we try to partner with these permanent hubs who have a vested long-term interest, usually, like I said, from the region. They're kind of, this is their home, they're trying to build it for the long term. We are more of the nomadic network that connects the few. So maybe to look this is terrible, I'm going to get probably trouble for these analogies, but the way we kind of look at it is, if you have the funnel, the temporary events for us on top of funnel, Burning Man for Geeks, kind of bring the people in, bring the project in, around the world, temporary testing environments. Then we kind of have the next layer, reducing the funnel down to what we would think is, more the residencies, the more long-term experiments, the kind of startups and projects that have come out of this ecosystem, that are more becoming somewhat like accelerated incubation formations, maybe somewhat of a YC or something could be a similar analogy. Then we partner with the permanent hubs, which are Esmeralda in Northern California, the Galefa Mindful City in Bhutan, we're working with some of the UK and South Africa, NetX State, and projects in Argentina as well. We're looking for long-term collaborative partners. Those are really tough to structure. The way they're usually structured is, sometimes we act as a marketing BD arm for a physical project that's getting built for the long term. They are doing the physical side, working with the local government, the legal aspect, the actual infrastructure. We do the people in the project, and then we have these month-long experiments that we usually do. I'll take Esmeralda as the most vetted example, which we're going back to the third year now. They're building a new town, 1,200 acres north in Northern California. We do our events, there's nothing there besides land, like they're going through permitting right now, the land's bought. We do our pop-up village tenants on the freeway in Hillsburg, and we use that environment as like, to showcase what they're happening there. So they've used us as a marketing arm, while also using our month-long experiments to test out stuff that they would eventually potentially inherit, this beyond just the culture and community, but also stuff like payment systems, identity systems, governance systems, non-legacy infrastructure. So that's the collaboration we have. And eventually, when they have built the town Esmeralda, we would port over and start hosting our events there. It's almost like reverse engineering a city. Normally, a city exists for hundreds of years, creates a culture and community, and attracts some type of event or community, like in Austin attracts South by Southwest, or Miami attracts North Basel, or you name it, whatever. We're reverse engineering that, but we create the events the decades before the city even exists, and then we port over and have kind of created, fast track them to somewhat of an actual culture and community that started from the internet versus started from physical real estate. And then the interesting part is connecting those, right? So then there's the arbitrage opportunities, and that's what kind of brings the resilience. When people are committing permanently to permanent hubs, like Ologies, like Esmeralda, like Prospero, like all these communities, we are the ones that are going to be the kind of the mesh network and create them. That's the final layer, is the arbitrage opportunities. Like Franz mentioned, from you can get capital easily from the Bay, and maybe you get like more affordable talent from Argentina, or favorable regulatory environment in Bhutan, and then you can start connecting those. And then the question is, what is the model to connect those? Is it a protocol? Is it a membership? Is it a citizenship? Is it a token? I don't think we have the mental model yet to connect that, but we're playing the long game. That's 10 years, 20 years out in the future. We're just trying to build a community, grounds up as much as possible, incubate some interesting ideas that actually can prove that this is actually a fertile ground for new schools of thought, new tech, new projects, and then partner with these permanent hubs that are committing to, dealing with the legacy infrastructure, such as the issues with the working, recognizing with local states and their legal frameworks, is our view. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but does that answer your question, someone?
A little bit. I mean, I was kind of physically force, but I think maybe what I'm hearing from you is you're kind of like incentivizing people being responsible nations. Like if I look at that map, there's a notable absence where there's not as much safety. So maybe your way of interacting is just incentivizing good behavior, essentially.
Or by having the sister city network, be able to connect, you have a possibility to, you're not necessarily fully committed to that space.
Yeah.
So you essentially get to, instead of having to head on, deal with the force, there is this possibility to exit or spread out the risk.
Yeah.
And again, this kind of gets to the problems of like passport provision stuff, but the ideal is that if Esmeralda now has a problem with the US government and they get shut down, that those citizens have access to other nodes around the world, and kind of creating a level of, less dependence on that physical dependency of the country.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you to both. You want to? We have 9 minutes. 9 minutes, so let's keep it brief so we can make the best.
I have a short case study that is an interesting one for people that are wanting to contribute and be part of these communities, but that are living in host countries that are not traditionally very friendly. So there's a really interesting project called CDAO that's based in China, which is a host country that is not so happy for competing forms of political power. And they managed to create a really large diaspora also for people that are Chinese but live outside of China and still want to have a container for like a Chinese identity, but that is not represented by the state. And they're experimenting with Web3 technologies because they need these type of like private and secure communication technologies that are anonymized to be able to organize themselves and be safe. And I think they have like 10,000 members worldwide. And so far so good. And they have also some local hubs and ways of integrating people that are still like scared of how it might spark attention in the host state. So just like a tip to keep your eye on CEDAW because it's a really interesting case study in this one.
Thank you, Lovisa. We have 2 more questions at least, Ryan and then Fede. Okay, 3, 4, 5. Let's try to make the best of it. If not, we'll make it a little bit longer, or not. You have to turn it.
Yeah, I got you.
So try to keep the questions.
To be clear, I'm a member of the Edge team for this event. I'm not speaking on behalf of Edge right now. It's not a consensus shared view. Speaking of plurality, I think that we're hitting on a really essential question. I just want to honor and give some gratitude for the question that you asked. And also, I don't know your name, but you were speaking about the right to exit, right? And we got some pushback. I think another way to look at that is like agency towards autonomy, right? So yes, we can talk about the right to exit, but we can also speak about our agency towards creating autonomy. And there are some projects in the world that I think are very worth looking at in terms of their social structure and forms of organization, and we can talk about the tooling and technologies that kind of parallel with those. And I'll get to that in a second, but I first want to like give some gratitude to Regen and to Edge for doing something when you're talking about the actual villages and places that are kind of that third layer of deepening, right? These are the folks that are starting to talk about the fact that we are earthbound, essentially. Like, this has to get to the conversation of territory and material, and or it doesn't become realized, right? We all need watersheds and water to live. We all need shelter. Like, we are essentially earthbound. And in order to have autonomy over a territory, we do need to get to the place where you're bringing up, which is how do we defend that autonomy? And when we're talking about the state, like, we are essentially talking about an apparatus that has coercive force in order to control a territory. So if we're talking about the inversion of that, we're talking about a society, a group, a collective, a community that has the ability to defend itself from state coercion and state force in some kind of way, or to negotiate some kind of, consensus. We will cooperate in such ways, but without the extraction and coercion that we usually see from state-making projects. So I think this is like an essential question that we're getting to when we look at the communities of like Rojava in northern Syria, the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico. We're looking at communities that are defending their autonomy from state-making projects while creating a more coordinated, distributed, decentralized, consensus-based way of organizing with each other that is very, very much based on the land, the watershed, the food systems. I think that we will all do a lot better in this design and thought process together if we start looking at some of the ways that are social and soft of how people coordinate in community, things like mediation and conflict resolution processes, accountability processes, restorative and transformative justice, ways of governance and decision making, like how do people actually govern a territory from the bottom up and create consensus that builds from the most local kind of focal point towards a more coordinated and distributed system over a shared territory. We need to be looking at that just as much as we're looking at how individuals who are finding like a common identity or shared value system across territories are kind of going from the web down through like the territorial. So I just want to bring that other kind of perspective into the room and see where they meet in the middle.
Thanks, Ryan. If we have a consensus and we have a little time, I would like to hear the comments of the other ones here. And if you urgently want to say something, I'll give you the mic. See? Like.
My original question, I think, is no longer relevant. Well, thank you. Super energizing conversation. But actually, bridging on what has just been said, actually, I think what's happening in the Argentina and chain residency, which I've been visiting, is so interesting for me because essentially what you're doing is bridging the physical, the community, the local with the cosmos, right? And when you focus on the problems that the host community has and give them tools and bring the talent and expertise to, for example, imagine if one of the, I'm not really sure which entities you're working with, but every town like this one has a local water board, right? The process flows, the services, the process flows that local water board realizes, which need to be digitalized, are exactly the same that the local water board in a town in Costa Rica, right? There's no need for people to build their own workflows, right? And so things that are piloted here, built here, solutions that are built in this type of towns can be exported, can be forked by other geographies. And by doing that, you're actually breaking the monopoly that governments have on the provision of those services, right? So you're basically making different jurisdictions compete for the better solution. I'm Costa Rican. Why do I need to wait for my country to build a workflow or for a service that Singapore has already digitalized and does it extremely well, right? And so that's why I feel, I don't know if that's what you guys are trying to do, but that's why I'm going every day, because it's very interesting, right? And then it doesn't create a conflict, right? Host regions want to have you because you're bringing the expertise and the knowledge to help them manage collectively the resources, right? It really is. I mean, for me, what I've loved about this whole movement, which I'm very new to, I've just jumped into it a few months ago, is the ideas of, you know, Ostrom, Meadows, Buckminster Fuller. Suddenly, we have the technologies to actually make them a reality, right? It's such an exciting moment.
Damn, plus 1,000.
Indeed. Please, Fede, to her.
I think there are both external factors and internal factors for society to function. So I think there's those defense and stuff around external factors. And I'm very curious about sort of internal factor, how society could function. For example, like in democratic societies, you have certain rights and responsibility, and citizens have some stake in it. The current models, for example, like Edge City or like other pop-up cities, like what are the stakes that like people can just do whatever they want to do, and they don't like it, they can leave, or are there any mechanisms to implement the stakes?
Yeah, can you give an example from a stake, just so make sure I understand the question correctly?
You're a kind of stakeholder in the society, like in a way. Well, I mean, I guess one of the reasons probably like a democracy is kind of failing is like you're actually supposed to engage and like vote, but most advanced country like maybe like voting rate is like 50%, but like theoretically like you have society, you're in it, and you have some stake, which is I guess like a shared responsibility or like common goals to keep people together. So like the mission could be like a will from personal level, but it's very weak, right? So I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. I'm gonna try to keep it short. It's a good question, and I think I have a great answer. I think a lot of it is a shared mission, a shared vision. Right now there is no stakes. You know, there is just the putting of funds to pay for the stake, and that is obviously the biggest challenge. These things are not very sustainable. I think that is probably probably the best answer is, we're getting hundreds of people to commit time and capital in some form and extended amount of time, which is probably the most valuable format for a lot of people here, into a place and putting energy is kind of a crazy stake. I mean, that people see enough collective upside in this that they're willing to do that is incredible. That we don't have to hold them accountable to something that they can lose a stake in. It's like, you're losing your time, and if you think it's valuable for you, please commit your time to this. And it's so far it's working, which is, I think, just speaks to that there is something here.
Please.
So I must
You have
I begin this
turn.
question from a point of some...
Is it turn? You have to have a wide.
Oh yeah? Right.
Tick.
This is on? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Good.
I'm expressing this from a point of some naivety, and I appreciate everything you've shared. I'm also trying to keep this short. I think the question that I have builds on, in some sense, on some of the other sentiments that were shared. It occurs to me that there is a sense in which the analog, when I think of, okay, there is an organism that's trying to grow on or in another organism, at a certain scale, some of these things can be naturally complementary. There are bacteria, millions of them living within each of us, and they help us to live our lives and process our food, and that's a fantastic, very symbiotic relationship that we have. There are also other types of bacteria or organisms that we would then call parasites, and we think, oh, actually, this thing is feeding off of the resources that I provide. It's taking some of the food and the things and the infrastructure that I have, and it's using it to its own ends. And actually, sometimes it can be so small that it doesn't matter, but once it gets to a certain size, actually this is a problem. I now need to go to the hospital. And this kind of goes towards some of the conflicts arguments that were raised before. So the question is really just to better understand how you see the models of either this corporational conflict, where there can be a sense in which at a certain size that some models of cooperation can actually work very well, but then you still need a different model of, like that model can break down once you reach a certain size. Like when these things are small, they can be great ideas and everyone can be happy and we can all get along, but actually if it gets momentum, if it gains some power, it gains some size, then actually the system can feel under threat and the relationship can break down. So hopefully that's useful.
Good question.
Who wants it? Chance?
I won't answer too much, but I will invite you to ask about 19th century Mennonite migration.
Really want it, or we can pass it?
This is
Of time, I don't want to. For the time.
It's like 2 sentences.
I would just say, like, part of what we're trying to
You can make
experiment
it in
with
15
in
seconds.
Web3 is cooperation at scale. And with DAOs, you know, we've seen it not be amazingly successful so far, but there are some great examples, and continuing to innovate on cooperation at scale, whether that's funding public goods, resource coordination, other governance challenges. So I think we can bring the learnings from that and then apply them into these real world scenarios of network societies and kind of continue on those systems. Hopefully we can coordinate at scale better than the nation states, and I like the frame of out-cooperate the competition. But yeah, we're yet to see that fully manifest, but there's definitely some interesting seeds.
Just a quick note that we should be really grateful to DAOs for experimenting so widely with democracy these last 10 years, because we've never had such a good experimentation lab for democratic coordination before. Before we needed to take over a country to be able to do this kind of experimentation, but now we can do it in blockchain networks, and we get incredible data. So, and we're just starting to really analyze this data and draw the learnings from it. So I just want to underline what Matti said, and invite all of the researchers that are interested in this to dive into this, because it will be a valuable asset for all of these communities to scale impactfully.
One sentence to add to I think the thought process that it needs to scale, in the sense that we think a nation state scales population, is potentially wrong. And in the vein of coming from a decentralized community, it would be just more sub-communities. And I think you could have you're limited by the amount of passports you can hold, but there should be no limit on the amount of communities you can join, hence there will be more communities. You could be in a network society of, I love saunas, I would love to have some affiliation with saunas where I could enter sauna every single place in the world. But you could get that localized to an extent, and there is the sauna DAOs out there, I recommend joining them. But I think the concept of it scaling like a nation state is not necessarily probably the model we should be looking at.
Thank you, Tela. One last comment on Sam.
Okay,
Yeah?
2 perspectives, 1 question, less than 30 seconds. The most important
We are
part
draining
of
you guys.
The most important part of an archipelago is its sea. We talk about islands, it's actually the connective tissue between them that really matters, and what it makes possible, right? Second thing, diplomatic recognition is an official term for basically an official friendship. We've heard a lot about what is essentially symbiosis, right? Your best defense is having friends. If you're mutually beneficial, it's harder to worry about that. And invitation, Chance and I are co-hosting the Citizenship Protocol Residency, where a lot of these themes are actually being discussed. We're looking at a lot of these themes that have come up, I think with maybe some sharper language today. If you're interested in that, we are halfway through our Imagination Week, where we're actually using the mode of fiction to write stories about many of these possibilities as a way of expanding our thinking around it. Our session is 3 p.m. today. If you're interested, come talk to me or Chance. Thanks.
Which residency is that today?
It's the Citizenship Protocols Residency, CPR for short.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, we can call it for today. I think we need to make a round table with everyone interested in this and discuss it more deeply. Maybe in your residency that will be the good place. Yeah, thinking for the next week. Thank you very much for your time, for your presence here, for you and for all the audience here. It's been a pleasure to start discussing these concepts. And I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of reactions. I think we have to control it right now, and it's a matter of schedule. I will ask you guys just to take a picture with us, for the closing, and everyone is free to leave. We can, if not, then go to have some lunch and share more thoughts together. Again, thank you. Gracias. Gracias, muchas gracias. Thanks.
You legend.
Sharing your thoughts.
Bro. Yes,
That's really fun.
Very nice for coming. Thank you.
I love the shirt, by the way.
This one, yeah. It's a good one.
It's fun.